Chai FM, 101.9 megahertz of life.
I hate having these conversations on a Friday, but we actually have to have them any day of the week because they are that important. And that is that a new report has revealed that anti-Semitic assaults in the UK have increased by 82% during the first 6 months of 2026, marking one of the sharpest rises in recent years. The figures released by the Community Security Trust has shown significant increase in violent attacks targeting Jewish people, promoting renewed concerns about safety of Jewish community. Community leaders have said that the statistics reflect not only rising hostility but also the urgent need for stronger action from government, law enforcement and civil society. Well, we have watched this train smash. We've watched the UK government ignoring, gaslighting and pretending that this wasn't a problem. It started even a few years ago within the Labour Party itself. We watched that shambles. But what now? Surely it has reached a point that nobody can pretend that this isn't a major concern. To help us unpack these troubling developments, we are joined by Adrian Cohen, Senior Vice President and Chair of the International Division at the Board of Deputies of British Jews. Adrian, a very good morning and thank you for joining us.
For having me on.
A great pleasure. Actually, it's not a pleasure because it's just such a terrible conversation.
I know.
It's the statistics are the statistics. I would imagine you didn't need these statistics to know what was going on within the community.
No, that's right. I mean, I think in previous conversations we've had, this doesn't come as a surprise to us. I mean, it's last year was itself the second highest year for anti-Semitic incidents, and then we've been waiting for these statistics, and we know that that since then, because of the terrible incidents that there were, many of them, the more kind of notorious ones, are believed to have been Iranian connected. That this is going to kind of feed through into the latest statistics. So when they've come, it's not a surprise, but even though it's not a surprise when they do arrive, it's nevertheless, it still feels like a punch to the solar plexus because it reminds you of how dire the situation is.
Is it better or worse that some of the major incidents were Iranian motivated and sourced? That
contributes to the statistics, but overall, nevertheless, it doesn't explain this in its entirety. There's overall, the trend has been a very difficult one, and the problems extend way beyond just the Iranian connected ones to a much wider, more diffuse problem, and as we've said, the obsession that there is in large parts of the of political society around the conflict between Israel and Hamas and Hezbollah, etc., and it is partly what's driving this. So it's not, you can't just explain it by reason of hostile state actors. It's driven by. There are a number of factors, but it's partially driven by the obsession that some of our politicians have with Israel and Gaza, particularly as we've seen, with the Green Party, and indeed other politicians across the spectrum who just major on this issue, and so it's a point that we've made to the government and others. You can increase the provision for security, which is obviously very important. And policing, but until you deal with a lot of the political discourse, that these problems are going to persist.
Yeah, in a way, it's like taking Panado Acamol for a cold. It's for something serious, but you're not curing it. All you're doing is dealing with a symptom. Has there been? Is there any sense that this is finally being taken seriously?
So there are of practical steps. So when as the previous Prime Minister was stepping down, Keir Starmer, a whole range of measures were announced. So a large increase in the financial provision for policing and security. They announced, if you recall, £250 million in additional policing and other security. That's going to take time to make its way through the system anyway. And of course, it's welcome to have additional security, but we don't want to live in a gilded cage either. You have to address the wider issues, and security itself is never the complete answer, because God forbid someone finds a way through and is able to commit an atrocity, God forbid. So it's the underlying wider issues still have to be tackled, but that is happening. There are attempts to address the more extreme anti-Semitic rhetoric. The policing, the Crime and Policing Act, we've got greater powers which have been given to the police to intervene in relation to protests. So there are changes to legislation, changes to financial provision. So there are these things happening. But whilst the conflict in the Middle East persists, whilst we have politicians who just obsess about it, those underlying problems still remain, and those are things which we regularly discuss with government to try and get people to tone that down, to try and give things a wider perspective as well.
One of the crucial incidents, I believe, was the famous soccer story, the soccer incident with Maccabi Tel Aviv, and that was a very, very interesting case of gaslighting, of abuse of power, of anti-Semitism. With the knowledge, perspective, and data that we now have, is there a call for action and a sort of a remedy towards situations like that? Because I would imagine from a police and from a government perspective, that must be very, very uncomfortable for them.
Yeah, so it was West Midlands Police, and the Chief Constable, the most senior policeman of that force, he did step down as a consequence. But it's not entirely finished business, really, and we would like to see something happen in Birmingham which reflects the fact that a huge mistake was made, something symbolic, and that's not happened yet. So we do hope that something will mark the kind of an acknowledgement of the severe mistakes which were made in that case, and we very much do hope that lessons were drawn from what happened, but we'll have to see. But you're right to highlight that.
In terms of the community itself, we've obviously following this quite closely. We see the unhappiness, the concern, the focus on the future. Has this improved at all, or is this still very, very much front and center of the minds of UK Jews?
So we're a resilient community. The synagogues I go to are very active. People are very, very much living a full and enriched Jewish life. But it is an issue. You turn up synagogue, there's huge security. We have protocols in place now, and security mechanisms going in and out of the synagogue or other communal buildings. It's perhaps not as critical as it was if you'd asked me a few months ago, when with the stabbings in Golders Green that we'd had at the time, and the firebomb attacks on the ambulances and the other buildings. At the moment, that's sort of subsided, and so it's not perhaps as critical, but I think it's still nevertheless it's like a bit of a reprieve, but I don't think anyone's banking that as something you can rely on. If situation can change or escalate quite quickly. Perhaps things aren't as acute in the Middle East at the moment, so
therefore it's maybe a bit easier. We do need to unfortunately leave it there. Adrian Cohen, thank you as always. Wishing you a Shabbat Shalom, Senior Vice President and Chair of the International Division at the Jewish Board of Deputies, British for British Jews.